Hello and welcome. My name is Michele Paradise and my company is called Finding Paradise. Funny that, isn't it? And I welcome you to my masterclass today, which is all about relationships, how we can navigate them, how we can get better relationships. I'm going to give you takeaways and information that you can implement immediately. So let's get started. You know that phrase, it's not you, it's me? We all dread hearing that. I know I did in relationships. Darling, I'm sorry, but the relationship is over. It's not you, it's me. Well, today I'm going to flip that on its head because what if it was us? What if it was us? It is me and it's not you. Now, before you spin off and think, what is she talking about? Is it all my fault? No, there's absolutely no blame and no shame with anything I'm about to say. This isn't about somebody is right and somebody's wrong. This is about reflecting on what we brought to the relationship and what we gave to the relationship and how we can manifest a better relationship in the future. So I'm going to talk about myself for a moment because I always think it's good to give an illustration of something, and there's no one better to use than myself. I grew up and I really modeled the behavior of my parents first. This is what we all do. So this is something I want you to think about while I'm talking about it. We model the behavior of our parents' romantic relationship as well, because it's the very first romantic relationship that we're exposed to. Think about it. And those first 7 years of our lives, which are the most crucial ones for developing our personality and our choices, we are like sponges absorbing everything that we see and hear. And what you might find interesting is we absorb more of what we see than what we hear. That is of greater importance to us, what we see, because predominantly we're quite visual beings. So we're watching everything our parents are doing, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're getting our information from them, and we are normalizing their behavior. So if they have a very dysfunctional, argumentative relationship, even with physical abuse, guess what? We begin to normalize that because that's all we see. And it might not be until a bit later, maybe, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, we start having sleepovers or play dates with our friends, and we begin to get exposed to other types of relationships. So we may have grown up in a very dysfunctional relationship, and then we see our friends' parents holding hands, kissing, sitting close to each other. And that's like really weird to us because my parents never did that. I didn't even know that was something they could do. I didn't know this was something that parents did do. I saw quite the reverse. Now, I'm not saying that my parents argued all the time. That's not what I'm saying, but they weren't tactile and loving. And for me, that was part of what I took away as normal. So I was, if you're, really looking into what I'm saying right now, you can see how I would have begun to not necessarily show my feelings and be tactile, even though inside I may have wanted it. So we grow up, we model the behavior of our parents' romantic relationship. We get a lot of information from it, and that becomes a template for us until there may be an intervention. And for some of us, there's never an intervention. My intervention, and I'll explain what I mean by that later, my intervention came much later in my life. So what I did is I took that template and I lived my life with it, and certainly in terms of romantic relationships. And I developed what is called an attachment style. And I'm really going to go into attachment styles later because I think it's important for you to explore the possibility of what your attachment style is, because it really can get in our way. Now, again, there is no one to blame in any of this. I'm not blaming the parents because there's something called legacy and generational trauma. Our parents did the best they could with the knowledge and the information they had. And if it wasn't that great, then they weren't able to pass on to us some of the things we need to know. And what we do in our families, we, as I say, model their behavior. we normalize their behavior, and then that becomes familiar to us. And if you think of the word familiar, it actually has the word familial in it, which comes from family. So it's all there. It's all there. These aren't my unique ideas. These are what I've studied, learned, gathered from working with clients for over 20 years, hundreds and thousands of clients I've worked with. And I see this pattern. So as humans, we have a pattern, and we have many patterns actually. And one of them is how we go into relationships. So let's go back to my story. I grew up, I was emotionally shut down, not physically tactile or anything like that. And I was quite afraid because my attachment style that I had been born into is disorganized attachment. And again, I'm going to come back to those. I'm going to really show you what each one of them look like. And I'll talk about mine when I do that. So I have this very disorganized attachment style, and I start dating. And there were some really, really lovely guys in my life in the beginning. I mean, my first real love affair, my first lover was this amazing guy. I struggle to even talk about it because it's like, why did I let that go? But I now understand why, because I didn't recognize it as safe. And I'll take a moment to explain what I mean. We think we're looking for love and happiness in relationships, but actually what we're looking for is safety. And that's super important to us. We look for safety in every moment of our lives. We smell food before we really eat it. We taste a bit of it if we're not sure before we really eat the whole plate. We look at the traffic and look at lights before we cross a road. We're vigilant about our safety. And it's the same in relationships. So there I was, going out into life, emotionally shut down, having been raised in a disorganized attachment style, which will make sense later, and believing that I wasn't good enough because my needs weren't met in childhood. And no one knew this at the time. So I went out into the world and I dated quite a few guys. And it never went well. And I would say to my friends, where are all the good men? All men are losers. Where are they? And that sounds awful to say that, because not all men are losers, not all women are losers. But that's how I saw the world from my perspective. And perspective is reality. And I wanted to know where they were. And I never, ever entertained that it might be me and not them. Remember, it's not you, it's me. I never entertained that thought. So I kept having disastrous relationships. And I remember so clearly, I was talking to somebody about it, one of my mentors, and they said to me, have you ever considered that you're the common denominator in all of these relationships, that you're the one that's always there? And it just hit me right between the eyes. I thought, yes, that's so true. Very painful realization. But I realized that I was the common denominator, and that all the men were pretty much the same. They had different faces, different names, different jobs, and different nationalities, but they were always the same guys. So why was I attracting the same guys all the time? It had to be me.